just typed that in about the 5 vetoes. I just typed the last question. I never got the sense of why the world doesn't.
Why isn't there a movement against the veto powers? How does that work with so many people of the world? The veto power, the UN was established primarily under US initiative, but it was basically the victors in World War II. China was brought in because China was then, was Chiang Kai-shek's China, the Kuomintang, was an ally of the United States. So the United States brought China in. And it was set up so that they would protect themselves. That's the UN. There's no way for other power, maybe the great majority of the world doesn't like it, but there's nothing they can do about it. How are they going to change the UN to eliminate veto powers? If they did, the 5 countries that have vetoes would just pull out of the UN. I mean, it's kind of like there is a treaty in for the prevention of production of nuclear weapons. It's an official treaty. It's in force, signed by, I think, about 120 countries. The nuclear power simply refused to abide by it.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, there are hundreds of countries who had all the time to start a movement or resistance that, you know, this lopsidedness should not work for long enough. I mean, this just does not make sense to any man who can think that 5 people can just veto anything, even if it makes perfect sense, out of the table. I mean,
certainly unjust, but what are you going to do about it? I mean, if the United States decides not to accept world court judgment, as it did, what are you going to do?
Well,
if
somebody's got to start somewhere, right?
I mean, take Pakistan.
Yeah.
Pakistan developed nuclear weapons in violation of international law, happened to be supported by the United States. The United States basically gave it a green light for its own reasons. But what is anyone going to do about it? It would have to be changed within Pakistan. Similarly, if the United States, or take right now Russia, Russia is violating the UN Charter by invading Ukraine. Can you do anything about it? Well,
you certainly can start to do something about it as part making up blocks. And well, I you know what I'm amazed about it, the fact that nothing was even initiated against this 5 veto ship. Never. It was never even on the table for discussion. That's the kind of thing that appalls a guy like me.
It's been on the table for discussion for decades, but the world is run by the powerful. And the only way to change that is by undermining the basis of their power. In the case of the great powers, nuclear wielding powers, the veto powers, has to be done from within.
Within the United States, or within Russia, or within these 5 countries? That's what you're saying?
There's no other way.
Yeah.
When Britain was ruling the waves, how could you change that? Either by war or internally within Britain. I mean, you know, there's a tremendous amount of injustice in the world, but you have to look at its structure and ask on what it's based and see if we can undermine the basis for the illegitimate power. We can talk about it, but, you know, say how unjust it is, but that doesn't do anything any more than...
I'm sorry.
Take internal repression. So, for example, there's plenty of internal repression in Pakistan. Can anybody do anything about it? only inside Pakistan.
Well, you don't see that kind of even a talk on U.S. television or in the universities. Students don't, they naturally accept the fact that we have a veto, even though everyone with any kind of a common sense would know by sheer empathy.
Well, we can question it, but we
Yeah.
are talking about systems of power. It's like saying, I don't like the mafia. Okay. I don't like criminal gangs. Okay, so we agree we don't like criminal gangs. Now what? If you tried to introduce new vetoes membership into the UN, the 5 veto countries that have the veto power would simply veto it.
Yeah, but you know what? If the very movement is about the veto ship, then naturally it would not make sense to veto it.
It doesn't, it's not legitimate, but they have the force. It's like
Yeah.
saying, I don't think that fossil fuel corporations should be producing poisons that are destroying the atmosphere. Okay, I just said it. Now what? Can I tell them you shouldn't be doing that? Stop? Of course not. You have to have mechanisms that will change it. I mean, there are such mechanisms, but they have to be put into play. In this case, just saying, I'd like to get rid of the veto is fine. We said it. Now, what makes them stop the veto? What makes them give up nuclear weapons? In fact, if you look back in past years, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there were major efforts on the part of the entire global South, non-aligned movement, G77, to try to create a new international economic order, which would take into consideration the needs of the former colonial colonized powers, the great majority of the world, the new international information order, which would allow them to break the monopoly of the imperial powers. Many important things were done. Fine statesmen were involved, African, Indian, Latin American. They were simply beaten down by greater power, the power of the imperial states. Well, that can't be changed by just talking about it. In fact, it was quite serious. So take Africa. Africa has a hideous history under European domination. I don't have to go through that. But in the 1950s, there were steps towards decolonization. The major country in Africa is the Congo, huge country, rich resources, lots of potential, could be one of the richest countries in the world, could have led Africa to development. Well, it was under Belgian rule, it was devastated, hideous crimes. But in 1960, it did formally become independent, had a very important leader, forward-looking, charismatic, great ideas, a lot of public appeal, Patrice Lumumba. So what happened? Well, first the CIA put out a hit to assassinate him, but they were beaten by Belgian intelligence, which managed to assassinate him first. Then Belgium, the United States, other European powers supported a murderous kleptomaniac, Mobutu, who robbed and destroyed the country and enriched himself. Now Congo's a total wreck. Millions of people are being killed while multinational corporations are extracting the minerals that you use in your iPhone and so on. It's beyond unjust. It's a major crime. So we can talk about it. Can we do something about it? Well, we can try. but not just by like that, not just by saying, why don't we do this? It takes education, organization, activism, major issues. That's true, and it takes something as simple as, not seems simple, as Iranian nuclear programs. The United States and Israel want to block them. There's an easy way to do that. Establish a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. That would end Iranian nuclear problem, if there is any. Everyone's in favor of it. Iran's in favor of it. The Arab states are in favor of it. G77, the global South, is in favor. Europe's in favor. So why doesn't it happen? Because the US vetoes it.
Yeah, that's exactly why I want to think
You
of.
can't even talk about this. Okay, so, I can give speeches about it, write articles about it. I don't get killed. It's a free country, but it can't reach the mainstream agenda without organization, kind of activism, with that'll overcome concentrated power. That's the way the world works.